6 years ago, our family relocated to a new neighborhood, marking a significant transition in our lives. We settled into a comfortable home in a welcoming community. We quickly formed friendships with our neighbors, Matt and Pam. Matt, a successful real estate agent, had a talent for storytelling, while Pam, a tall and slender blonde, was a devoted mother to their son, Chad. Becky and Pam became close friends, often meeting up while Matt and I developed a strong bond through our shared interests. Golf became a monthly ritual for us, and despite the age gap, Matt and I bonded over our shared love for the sport, often engaging in friendly competitions. Becky and Pam's camaraderie further strengthened our bond, creating an extended family feeling. I was unaware that these seemingly ordinary moments would soon be overshadowed by events that would challenge my marriage and shake our. On a notable golf day, I played a respectable round, finishing 18 holes 7 strokes over par. For years, Matt and I had been golfing together on a couple of occasions per month. He became my friend when Becky and I moved into our home. Matt, a large man with a talent for conversation, thrived in the real estate industry. Pam stayed home to care for their son, Chad, who recently turned 18 and is preparing for university. Pam and Becky hit it off immediately. Becky, a fit and attractive natural blonde with shoulder-length hair, remained the most beautiful woman to me until everything changed when she said, "We need to talk." Initially, I braced myself for bad news, thinking it might be something about her car or a family issue. My daughter Holly recently turned 18 and had started dating a boy named Dean. My mind raced through possibilities, including pregnancy. I was convinced of it when I sat down with Becky Henry. "My dear," she said, "you know how much I love you." "Of course, Becky," I replied, trying to stay cheerful despite the suspicions creeping into my mind that she might be pregnant. "Do you love me too, honey?" "What is the matter?" I inquired, detecting a certain unease. "We have been together for 20 years, 18 of them married. I love you more every day. I have dedicated my life to you and Holly. Do you agree?" she asked, her voice now serious and intent. I realized that it was not about a matter that Becky wanted that she thought I would object to. She had never mentioned wanting another child, so I quickly abandoned that theory. "I agree, honey. You always prioritize Holly's needs. I believe you will support me now," she said, her tone hopeful. "I am listening. Henry, as we age, our body's energy levels and Z-drive change. You have always been a wonderful lover, but as you age, it is harder to keep up. It is natural, and I understand that. It is crucial to understand that a man's masculinity is often questioned when his wife begins to doubt it." I had a feeling that she would continue speaking, so I simply nodded, waiting for the main issue to emerge. "It's different for me. I require closeness almost every day," she said, her tone slightly pleading. "Don't you think I feel the same way? Becky, I love you and want to care for you, but you cannot completely fight biology. This is understandable. I do not blame you. It is simply a natural consequence of the aging process," she replied, her voice softening. "Okay, Becky. You have identified my sexual shortcomings. Will you now address the issue I raised regarding my inability to fully satisfy you?" As she continued to talk about her need for more from me sexually, I sensed her patience wearing thin. I suspected she was about to ask for permission to have an affair. I was almost right. "Henry, please understand. I am not trying to belittle you. This is difficult for me to say, and Becky said, her voice trembling slightly, "I hope we can discuss it calmly." I remained silent, awaiting Henry's response. "I have a lover," she finally confessed, her voice breaking. I was taken aback and unable to respond. She continued, "We meet a couple of times a week. I don't love him, I love only you." I attempted to maintain normalcy at home, noting that I had always had her when I desired, and that would not change. "She was my wife, and needs come first," she said, her voice desperate for understanding. "I ask only that you consider my perspective. I intend to continue this." "Yes," I replied, my voice shaking with suppressed anger. "My needs have increased, and I need this, but it won't change how I feel about you or our lovemaking." "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice rising. "I'm not telling you. It's not one of your friends or colleagues. It's just someone I met." To accept this because I love you, I said, my voice colored with disbelief. I am aware that you love me and want me to be happy. I have striven to ensure that you have not noticed any changes. The alternative would be a divorce, alimony, and child support. I love you and do not want that, she said, her voice now calm and calculated. I attempted to remain calm, but I was enraged. How dare she threaten me with divorce? Holly might not be happy living with a cheating mother. You have a clear understanding of the situation, have you not? You have deceived me, and now you expect me to accept it. I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm, please do not see it that way, honey. Do not call me that, she pleaded. I snapped, using obscene language will not help the situation. She said, her voice admonishing, it may not affect us, but it makes me feel better. I retorted, I know this is difficult to hear, but this will not affect us. You did not notice before, and you will not in the future. She explained that it was an activity she engaged in for her own benefit, akin to volunteering in her leisure time. I assumed that I could trust her, although I was not convinced. I asked her to clarify her statement, and she replied, I'm confused. I demanded that she explain her motives. I was determined to demonstrate my love and gratitude for allowing this, but she was taking me to her. Becky said, her voice was calm but determined. Are you joking? You leave for a week with your lover while I work to support you, and I'm supposed to welcome you back. What did I do to deserve such disrespect? I retorted, my anger barely contained. You didn't do anything, she replied, her tone in an attempt to gain understanding. I inquired about the circumstances surrounding Holly. I was curious about how I should respond to her about my solo vacation. We have always traveled as a family, so this was a significant change. I was trying to grasp the situation. I had already informed Holly that some friends and I are taking a trip and that it would not affect our family vacation this summer. She did not mind and might even be glad that I am going. Becky then explained the situation almost cheerfully, giggling, which made me feel as though she was joking. The topic is emotionally charged, and you believe I will allow her to remain in this false belief? I inquired, with evident skepticism, about the evidence you have to the contrary. Henry, I presented her with brochures and promised to provide an account of my experience when I return. She expressed a preference for my account over yours. She stated her confidence in my veracity with a tone that indicated she considered my opinion to be inconsequential. You do not like this turn of events, I perceive. How do you expect to remain married to me after this? I demanded, feeling the weight of her betrayal. We love each other, Henry. Everything will go back to normal once I return. Becky insisted, her voice soothing but unconvincing. I am tired of this nonsense. I attempted to persuade her to reconsider her decision, emphasizing the long-term consequences of her actions, even if we remain married. However, I was met with an unwavering resolve. In my final appeal, I implored her to reconsider her decision, emphasizing the potential for our marriage to improve if she remained. However, she was resolute in her decision. In response, she stated her resolve remained unwavering. I attempted to facilitate a change in circumstances, but it has already resulted in significant alterations. Nevertheless, you have fulfilled your obligation by disclosing the information. Unlike you, I will not engage in dissembling. I will be in the carpentry shop if you care to inquire. I informed him in a tone laden with resignation. Henry, exercise caution. She cautioned that operating power tools while upset is dangerous. I proceeded to the basement, disregarding her advice. I was incredulous that she believed I would acquiesce to this plan, given her opinions. I intended to inform Holly about her mother's activities, including a trip to Hawaii, which we had planned to take together. Given the circumstances, she ultimately decided to proceed with the relationship. I considered the potential outcomes, including the possibility of divorce, which would entail financial responsibilities such as child support and alimony. While I could afford these obligations, I was reluctant to accept the idea of her cohabiting with her boyfriend while I continued to live and work independently. I did not perceive any alternative courses of action that would be more beneficial for me. The only remaining option was to remain in the house until Holly left for college. After that, I would depart, but I would not contact Becky again. I had been in the workshop for several hours when I heard Holly return home. Typically, she spent Saturdays with friends or Dean. I decided to inform Holly of the truth when I heard her conversing with Becky. "Good day, Mother. Have you informed Father about your excursion to Hawaii with Mr. Harrington?" Holly inquired in a relaxed yet curious tone. It was evident that she was aware of the details surrounding the trip. Becky had not divulged the information to her, yet Holly seemed to possess a comprehensive understanding of the situation. The identity of Mr. Harrington was not a concern for her. This prompted me to question whether Holly was acquainted with him. I was overcome with a surge of anger and confusion. I had informed him that he was not pleased and that he was now visibly disgruntled in the carpentry shop. However, he eventually became reconciled to the situation. Becky responded in a tone that was both dismissive and incredulous. She stated that she could not believe that he was so selfish. She then asked me, in a tone that was both rhetorical and accusatory, whether he would be happy if I were to pursue a relationship with someone younger. Holly stated that, in order for him to accept the necessity of a younger man in your life, he would have to acknowledge that he has no reason to complain. She expressed her teenage indignation at the mere suggestion. Becky had been filling Holly's head with this nonsense for years. In fact, she truly was Becky's miniature version. I realized with a sinking heart that I had informed him of this, but he had taken it personally. His fragile male ego could not accept the idea. It is not feasible for one individual to meet all the needs of another. I attempted to explain that people change with age, but he perceived me as his woman. Becky continued, her voice laden with condescension and a lack of respect. "I am gratified that I introduced you to Mr. Harrington, who is excited about the trip and has special plans for you." Holly said almost gleefully, "My daughter knew about the affair and helped her mother. She seemed to revel in my humiliation. How does my 18-year-old 1 year?" The older daughter was aware of at least one individual who was both older than her and within Becky's social circle, and thus a potential romantic interest. At least I have a name to investigate. I experienced a complex emotional response, a combination of betrayal and resolve. I implored her not to discuss our sexual relationship with him. It was an uncomfortable and inappropriate topic. Becky responded with a sudden change in tone, becoming stern. She reminded me that we had discussed the fact that things were not working between us. Holly responded, sounding defiant and proud, yet true. However, she advised against discussing the matter with Rick, emphasizing that Holly was underage and that he was her teacher. Becky expressed concern, noting that Holly was discussing topics beyond her understanding. I was hearing that my wife and daughter were conspiring together, and Holly was talking about things she shouldn't even understand. I needed to confront this situation head-on, but first I needed to gather all the facts. I was gratified to find that my plans took a drastic turn. I would not stay in the same house with these two women. A divorce was not an option either. I would be responsible for expenses until Holly graduated in June. At that point, I would move out and live elsewhere, while maintaining a household account for bills and food. I would stay in touch with her via email and phone, and we would decide which costs to cover. Holly's days of getting everything she wanted, like the car she had been asking for, were over. I could arrange everything within 2 weeks, while Becky's credit card was still active. If I were to work, I would likely find a place to live with relative ease. I would not feign contentment, nor would I create a commotion. Holly would eventually become aware of my knowledge regarding her role in her mother's betrayal, and I was curious about her anticipated reaction. I proceeded upstairs to take a shower and planned to go out for dinner. I did not wish to dine at the table with those who had betrayed us. The kitchen both glanced at me. Holly ran up as usual, greeting me cheerfully. She attempted to hug me, but I simply stood there. She pulled away, her tone indicating confusion. "What's the matter, Dad?" she asked. I looked at them and proceeded to my bedroom, where I relocated my belongings to a spare room until I could leave. I closed the doors and proceeded to the Becky, of course, could not leave me alone. She found her way in, and I was forced to confront her. What would she think if she knew I was angry with her? She did not do anything to me. Becky said, her voice sharp. I stared at her, then got back into the shower. I was subjected to a silent treatment. It was a rather immature response. "When you are done sulking, let me know. Dinner is ready." She abruptly departed, slamming the door behind her. I gave a shrug and proceeded to dress. Upon emerging, I observed the meeting. They fell silent upon my arrival. Holly smiled, seemingly hoping that I would join them and perhaps offer an apology. I turned and walked out. I entered my BMW and left. I ate alone at a local steakhouse, reading news articles to pass the time. I received no calls from anyone. I watched a late movie and returned home at approximately 1 a.m. The time was 12 a.m. 10 p.m. Upon discovering that everyone was asleep, I retired to the guest room and was soon asleep myself. Despite everything, my brief period of happiness was short-lived. I still found Becky attractive, and when she asked why I had slept there the previous night, I replied, "I did not want to sleep with you." She then asked, "Becky, I didn't want to sleep with you," and I turned away from her, got off the bed, and saw disappointment on her face. "Henry, I am still the woman you loved over the course of many years. Let me take care of you," she said in a soft voice. "You are not the same woman, and that is not the heart you shared with Becky. As long as you have another partner, I am out." "It is your choice, your husband or your boyfriend," I replied in a firm voice. "You are not being reasonable. I know you love me and will eventually see my point. I want you to be happy, and you will give me that." She stated that Sunday was like Saturday. I remained in the workshop and returned for dinner. The following 2 weeks elapsed rapidly as I worked late each evening. Each night, I requested that Becky not embark on the trip. "Becky, please do not go. Call him and terminate the relationship. Let us work on our relationship together," I implored. "Henry, I understand this is challenging, but I require your presence. It is merely a 1-week period, and then we shall resume our relationship." She insisted that he continue seeing her, emphasizing that it was not just a personal matter between them. I inquired, feeling the despair, "Yes, Henry, I'm sorry, but this is what I need. If you love me, you'll understand." "Holly, I could elucidate the reasons for my displeasure, but it would be more efficacious for another individual to do so." I responded, my voice imbued with gravity. "Someone else?" she inquired, her countenance a picture of bewilderment. "You should consult with your instructor, Mr. Harrington. He was instrumental in facilitating your mother's liaison with your father, which has led to my present predicament. I am at a loss as to how to proceed." Holly was taken aback to learn of her lover's identity. However, she did not exhibit any signs of contrition, displaying a demeanor similar to her mother's. Consequently, I introduced them, and she inquired, her voice calm, "I overheard your conversation with your mother." In response, I stated that it is merely Z's father, whom she does not love. She replied with a dismissive tone, questioning why everyone seems to hold this view. I attempted to clarify that marriage is not merely about Z and love, but about commitment and mutual respect. She retorted that she was leaving and that there was nothing that could be done. She urged me to do my best and to accept the consequences. Holly then made her exit from the room. She then proceeded to leave the room, effectively dismissing me and my feelings. We subsequently avoided each other until her mother's departure. Eventually, the day arrived when Becky was prepared and awaiting the taxi in the living room. Holly was present, engaging in excited conversation with her. I remained in the workshop until I heard the car arrive. "My taxi is here. I'd like to check out," I informed her. "This means nothing." "You'll see," Becky replied, her voice carrying a forced cheerfulness. She awaited my response with a cheerful demeanor, inquiring if I would kiss her goodbye. I replied in a flat tone, "Nope." Her voice then took on a tinge of resignation. Eventually, I heard the front door close, followed by the sounds of Becky's heels on the kitchen floor and the vehicle's engine starting. This marked the end of my marriage. During Becky's absence, I took a week-long leave of absence and relocated my belongings from the guest room to the bedroom in a discreet manner while Holly was at school. I relocated my belongings from the guest room back to the bedroom in an effort to make Holly believe that I was staying in the house to lull them into a false sense of security. I deliberately did not mention my relocation or the fact that I was divorcing Becky, intending for Becky to believe that I would be present when she returned. She was scheduled to return on Saturday evening, and I planned to be gone by then. Holly was aware of my knowledge of her involvement in the affair. One evening, as she prepared dinner, my phone rang with Becky's call, which I ignored. Then, Holly's phone rang, and I overheard her conversation. Holly said hello to her mother and inquired about the details of her recent trip. Holly expressed that her father was present in her home since he was aware of her relationship with me and that I had introduced her to her mother. Holly stated that there was no point in hiding, and her father had moved his belongings back to her bedroom. As soon as you departed, he was bluffing, as you had predicted. I believe he has come to terms with the situation. I will inform him that I love him. She then relayed Becky's message. My mother requested that I tell you that she loves you and that everything will be as it was before she returns. I nodded in acceptance of her words. The remainder of the week proceeded in a similar manner. I gradually relocated my belongings to my new apartment, taking only personal items on Friday. In the evening, I came to understand that my relationship with Holly was irreparably damaged after dinner. Holly approached me and inquired as to whether I would ever engage in conversation with her other than providing grumbling and monosyllabic answers. She then asked me to forgive my mother, but what about me? I looked at her questioningly, seeking clarification. What makes you think I have forgiven your mother? I asked, genuinely puzzled. This indicates that you intend to sleep in the same bedroom as her and have forgiven her. That is not the case. I have not and will never forgive your mother. She ruined what we had. It is precisely this distinction that I am attempting to convey. Holly, you are still a minor, and therefore, you are not fully cognizant of the nuances involved. I attempted to maintain my composure as she stood up, visibly agitated. I was merely 18, yet I was expected to grasp the intricacies of my mother's situation. She had provided me with a detailed account of the circumstances, yet I was still unable to comprehend her perspective. She had presented her actions from a self-centered standpoint, and I was compelled to express my displeasure. She had decided that her actions were justified, and she was the sole arbiter of what was important to her. It was of no consequence. I was overcome with frustration and shouted, unable to contain my feelings. This is absurd. My father, she was here for us every day. When she finally did something for herself, you could not accept it. Holly retorted, her words cutting deep. They hurt deeply. I am so sorry, she added, suddenly realizing the impact of her words. The rage and hatred I felt towards my daughter at that moment were overwhelming. Do not communicate with me further, I stated in a detached and definitive manner. I then proceeded to exit the premises and retire to my bedroom, disregarding Holly's entreaties. I spent the remainder of the night gathering my belongings, burdened by the loss of trust and the dissolution of relationships. Instead of requesting a ride from Rick, I took a taxi from the airport, having been informed by Holly that Henry was once again in the bedroom. I was reluctant to disturb Henry by having Rick witness our interaction, as everything was progressing smoothly. I entered the house, accompanied by the taxi driver, who assisted me in carrying my belongings inside. It was nearly dinner time, and I anticipated that Henry or Holly would have prepared something, but there was no indication of such. Perhaps Henry was planning a celebratory dinner in my honor. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and Holly rushed to embrace me, crying, "Hi baby, I missed you too, but there's no need to cry." I responded gently, attempting to console her. She continued to sob and tremble, indicating that her distress was more profound than simply missing me. I pulled her face away to look at her, inquiring, "What's wrong, baby? Where is he? Is Dad?" I inquired, concern evident in my voice. She struggled to control her emotions, and after a few minutes, she spoke. "Dad moved out. I drove him away." "What are you talking about? You told me he moved back to the bedroom." With trepidation, I retrieved the document. It was printed on a computer, with the exception of Henry's signature. "Becky, I hope your time in Hawaii with Rick Harrington was worthwhile, as it has resulted in the dissolution of your marriage and may potentially lead to Rick losing his employment. The school board will not accept your relationship. I have relocated, taking only my personal belongings. I will eventually retrieve my tools and woodworking supplies. I am perplexed by the prioritization of your sexual needs over the stability of our marriage. I was willing to forgive your infidelity, but your actions have irreparably damaged our marriage. The affair was a long one, and it is unclear why you did not simply call off the trip and vow never to see him again. Our marriage ended when the taxi left, and it is unclear why you involved our daughter in the affair. The disrespect she shows me is a result of your influence, and it is likely that she will have difficulty forming a normal relationship. I have only left you and Holly physically. I did not shirk my responsibilities. All your bills will continue to be paid. Funds will be deposited into your household account for necessary expenses. It is not anticipated that you will receive additional funds for entertainment. Your personal gratification is no longer a concern. I have provided my email and phone number for use in emergencies. If you require assistance, please email me and I will determine whether to approve the request. It is requested that you refrain from sending multiple emails requesting to return home or offering excuses. These emails will be deleted without being read. Michael is aware of my current residence, but he will not disclose this information. Due to the constraints of information security, I am unable to grant you access to my office. In the event that you attempt to do so, I will reiterate the message that I conveyed to Holly following her hateful speech. I am unwilling to engage in further communication with you or her. Your actions have inflicted significant damage to both relationships, and I have therefore decided to disengage from your lives. I am confident that Holly will secure a suitable partner to accompany her on her wedding day. I have held affection for you both for an extended period, but your conduct has reached a point of irreparable harm. I will no longer tolerate it. I will not allow you to do this to me. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading Henrik's letter. This was not how things were supposed to be. He was supposed to love me forever and understand that this was not about him or us. Involving Holly was a mistake, but it began with girl talk. She told me about her and Dean, and I talked about Henry and me to build trust. I mentioned her grandmother's affair, and Holly introduced me to Rick. At the choir performance, he was present in person and exhibited both physical attractiveness and a genial demeanor. I enjoyed my time with Henry that evening. After that, Holly repeatedly referenced him, stating that he was not seeking a serious relationship but rather a casual, recreational one. I was intrigued and initiated contact with him one night while Henry was away. I invited Rick over for dinner, and we ended up at his residence. I spent the night there. The following morning, Holly was aware of what had transpired. We discussed it in a manner reminiscent of close, long-standing friends. It was an exhilarating experience, and I came to recognize that I could maintain contact with Rick without Henry becoming aware of it. Rick and I met on a regular basis, typically once a week, in a discreet manner for several months. I was mindful of ensuring that Rick did not become overly attached, and our relationship continued to evolve. As our first night together approached, Rick extended an invitation to Hawaii. Henry and I had initially planned to accompany him, but the prospect of a week in paradise proved too alluring for me, particularly given my circumstances as a housewife. I found it challenging to justify such an extended absence. I had been absent for a considerable period, but I was confident that Henry would not object and would allow me to go. I believed that if I explained that there was no romantic involvement between Rick and me, but rather a purely platonic relationship, Henry would understand. That was why I informed him of my plans 2 weeks in advance, in the hope that he would come to terms with it. However, that did not happen. I was certain that when I returned and everything remained the same, Henry would see that it had not damaged him. However, he left, and I underestimated his love for me. I have lost everything in this situation, but I am a resourceful individual, and I am confident that I can find him and convince him to see things my way. I may have to cool things with Rick for a while and convince Henry that our relationship is over before resuming contact with him. Mike, Henry's brother, knows his new address, but I doubt he would be willing to help. Perhaps Fiona, Michael's wife, would be a more suitable contact. Once I find Henry, I can probably convince him to come back. He did not mention divorce, so it is clear that he does not want to lose me. However, he might be willing to reconsider if I can convince him otherwise. He attempted to convey his disinterest in communication with her with the "I never want to talk to you again" message, but it is unlikely that he was sincere. It is probable that he will realize that he cannot survive without her. On Monday, she will call Fiona, who is not at work at that time. In the meantime, Holly and she will manage. The weather was pleasant, so she decided to relax by the pool. The apartment complex she had moved into had a pool, a fitness center, and a large common area for parties. She had lived there for a couple of months. During the first week, I engaged in the process of unpacking my belongings. In the subsequent weeks, I experienced a period of depression during which I spent the majority of my time in front of the television. Eventually, I made the decision to resume my daily activities and proceeded to the swimming pool to relax and enjoy the sun's rays. The temperature of the water was likely not optimal for my comfort, but the act of lying in the sun and reading proved to be an ideal way to spend my time. I went on a few dates, but none of the individuals I met captured my attention. I was still in a state of mourning for the loss of my family and found myself missing the Becky I had married. I had been in a state of relaxation. After approximately an hour of sunbathing, I was approached by an attractive woman. She inquired as to whether I was a new resident of the area and expressed curiosity about my presence there. I introduced myself as Henry and extended an invitation for her to join me on the adjacent lounger. I then proceeded to sit up slightly to accommodate her. She smiled and moved a lounger next to mine. She had long brown hair and a beautiful figure, though she was not wearing a wedding ring. She turned to me and asked, "So, Henry, are you recently divorced or just trying to appear single?" "Why do you ask?" I inquired, curious about her observation. "Your finger has a tan line where a wedding ring used to be," she said. "Your eyes are sharp and very observant," I replied, impressed by her attention to detail. She demonstrated a noteworthy attention to detail. I clarified that I was not divorced, I had simply moved out while my wife was in Hawaii with her lover. She expressed interest in the situation, inquiring if it was an intriguing story. I acknowledged that it was not an interesting experience to live through, but I could understand how it might seem intriguing from an external perspective. I then inquired about the possibility of reconciliation. She responded with a tone of empathy, stating that she cared about her former spouse but that his actions had irrevocably ended any chance of reconciliation. I stated firmly, "You can inform me of the specifics when you extend an invitation to dine with me this evening." She proposed a playful smile, inquiring, "Is there a particular establishment you wish to visit?" I was intrigued by her directness and inquired, "Is there a specific venue you have in mind?" She replied, "My daughter is staying with my sister, so we can remain out later." Her eyes reflected a playful anticipation. I agreed, feeling a spark of excitement. Michelle looked at me and said, she made direct eye contact and stated, "Henry, I like you and you seem to like me. However, I do not engage in sexual relations with married men. Therefore, if you desire a chance, you will need to resolve your marital status." She spoke in a firm but kind tone. I believe I have received the motivation I needed, but let us first observe how dinner progresses. I replied, feeling a new sense of determination. We spent another hour relaxing by the pool, primarily in silence and reserved conversation for dinner. I prepared for my date with Michelle. I reflected on this unanticipated turn of events. I enjoyed the status of being married, yet I was uncertain about the prospect of entering into a new relationship. My sentiments regarding Holly were multifaceted. She had expressed hurtful remarks that were shaped by her mother's perspectives. I recognized that I would attempt to reconcile with her at some point, but Becky had reached her limit. I was determined not to allow her to impede my pursuit of happiness, even if it entailed compensating her. I collected Michelle at 6 p.m. We proceeded to an upscale Brazilian steakhouse in the downtown area. I had previously visited this establishment, but Michelle had not. She wore an emerald green dress that revealed a modest amount of skin at the top. She looked exquisite, and I informed her of my admiration. "Thank you, sir. You look quite dashing yourself," Michelle said with a smile. I took her hand and led her to my BMW, opening the door for her as my mother had taught me. We drove through the downtown area, discussing the various landmarks we passed. We held hands and it felt natural. We were seated at a romantic table in a private alcove, thanks to a well. After placing a $50 bill on the table, we were greeted by our server, Kelsey. We proceeded to order drinks and engage in conversation. Michelle inquired as to whether she should request the attention of another waitress. In response, I expressed my confusion, suggesting that if she persisted in her harassment, I would resort to extreme measures. She then adopted a playful expression, and I observed a hint of mischief in her eyes. This prompted me to smile. I made a mental note to tone it down, just in case she took my hand to calm me down. "Henry, I like you and want to get to know you better. I didn't mean to offend the waitress. She informed me that her husband had been unfaithful to her with his assistant, resulting in a pregnancy. Despite my astonishment, I was unable to fathom that anyone would engage in such infidelity with someone as physically attractive as she. I expressed my disbelief and gratitude, and she inquired about my marital status. My daughter is named Holly, but we do not discuss the matter much, as she shares her mother's views on infidelity. I conveyed a hint of sadness in my voice as I inquired about my wife. However, I will only inquire about her if you are comfortable doing so. I do not mind, Michelle replied gently. From my perspective, I appear favorably. Holly is as much a victim of her mother's influence as you are. Michelle said sympathetically, it is painful to realize that she holds me in such low regard, even if it is due to Becky's influence. I admitted, it is important to maintain open communication. She may eventually come around. I hope so, I am willing to make the effort. I said, are you ready to share your story? Michelle, I asked. My ex-husband, Jay, is the vice president of a gym chain. He hired a new assistant and they began sleeping together on business trips. His boss even warned him when she became pregnant. I left him and she receives generous alimony and child support, which provides her with a rationale for maintaining her daily routine. She elaborated that this is a noteworthy aspect of her situation, although perhaps not as impactful as an extramarital affair in Hawaii. Nevertheless, it is a commendable outcome. I observed that she has demonstrated resilience in navigating the dissolution of her marriage. However, she acknowledged that feelings of loneliness can occasionally affect her. She reiterated that the decision to end the marriage was the right one but expressed a sense of longing for the shared experiences they had. She extended an invitation, suggesting that she would be available to provide support and companionship if needed. She had experienced a similar situation and was willing to offer guidance and emotional support. Henry expressed gratitude for her willingness to help. She replied, I might take you up on that. She smiled and took my hand. I felt the need to reciprocate, so I stood up and kissed her on the cheek. I am anticipating further kisses, including longer ones, when you provide me with a lift home. I said with a smile. I kissed her again and returned to my seat. The dinner was excellent, as was our conversation. We proceeded to a dance club frequented by older people. Michelle, aged 35, was the most attractive woman there, and men repeatedly asked her to dance, but she declined them all. We danced together on several occasions, moving well and maintaining close proximity. A.M. We arrived at her apartment door. I had a wonderful time, Henry. Michelle said her eyes were sparkling. I replied that I had enjoyed it as well. Michelle inquired as to whether I would like to see her again the following day. I replied that I would like to see her as soon as possible. She replied that it was not too soon. She then informed me that she would have to pick up Joni at 11 a.m. I suggested breakfast at my place. I informed her that I make a great omelette. I suggested that I would be there at 8 a.m. At 8:30, she concurred. It was 30 minutes later, and I was grateful for the punctuality. Michelle was clad in black yoga pants and a white long-sleeve top, her appearance as fresh as if she had slept for 12 hours. I had brought sliced fruit for her omelette. She said this, holding the bowl in one hand and pulling me towards her with the other for a kiss. She then proceeded to walk into the kitchen with confidence. She then proceeded to examine the ingredients, noting that she would prefer her omelette to contain bacon, spinach, and cheese. She then requested that I place the fruit on plates while she prepared the omelette. She then began opening drawers and cabinets, which initially puzzled me, as our kitchens are arranged almost identically. She then made a remark about the similarity of our kitchens, which I found intriguing. I responded with a laugh and then finished serving the omelette. After eating, we sat on the sofa, embraced, and conversed. It was then that Michelle informed me she needed to retrieve her daughter, Joni, from her sister's residence. I accompanied her to the vehicle and exchanged farewell kisses. Call me later, she said, as she departed on Monday morning. I proceeded to schedule an appointment with a divorce lawyer. I inquired with a colleague at Alpha about his experience with legal counsel during his divorce proceedings. He suggested I consult with a formidable attorney whom he had retained during his own divorce. I located her contact information online and scheduled an appointment for Wednesday. I had assumed that Becky did not intend to initiate a divorce, so I was surprised when she requested one. I was eager to examine my relationship with Michelle and contemplate its viability. To simply file for divorce, Michelle and I conversed via telephone over the subsequent 2 evenings. I informed her of my visit to the lawyer, and she reassured me that it would be worthwhile on Wednesday. I received a telephone call from my brother, Michael. "What's up, bro?" I greeted him. "I'm just updating you. Becky keeps asking for your address. She's been trying to get Fiona." To assist her, Michael informed me that Fiona is reluctant to divulge any information, but that Becky is becoming increasingly desperate. He added, "Thank you for acting as a buffer." I told him I was grateful for his help, but that he didn't need to worry about it. He replied, "Has she attempted anything at your office?" I asked, expressing concern. She had visited a few times. Initially, she made several attempts to gain access to the property, but was unsuccessful. She continues to call daily, and our secretary has noted a pattern of behavior that could be perceived as a game. Michael informed me that the lawyer meeting went well. Denise Duncan, a lawyer who specializes in assisting women in divorces, took my case after reviewing the evidence provided by a private investigator. She advised that we could leverage this evidence in our favor. Despite her recommendation to utilize the investigator's report, I was prepared to divide assets equitably and assume alimony and child support that evening. I was deliberating on the menu when there was a knock at the door. Michelle entered with a picnic basket and plates. I accepted them from her, placed them on the table, and kissed her. That was a pleasant greeting. "I missed you as well. May I inquire as to your whereabouts?" Michelle inquired, smiling up at me. She informed me that Joni was out for pizza with a friend. I surmised that you had not yet eaten and were curious about the outcome of the lawyer visit. We both desire the commencement of proceedings. She informed me that her eyes were filled with anticipation. I concurred. We must communicate effectively and obtain the necessary documentation, including the marriage certificate. It is in the way. Let him eat, I said, feeling a sense of relief at her support. She pulled out containers of brisket and potato salad, and we started eating. I detailed my visit to the lawyer while we enjoyed the meal. "You're being kinder than I was. Jay and I were only married for 9 years. Should I be tougher?" Michelle asked, looking thoughtful. "That is dependent on your own perspective, but I appreciate your attentiveness and fairness. I am aware that if we were to quarrel, you would be reasonable. Jay was not capable of that." "I appreciate your understanding," she replied. She remained with me for approximately 2 hours before receiving a call informing her of their return from the pizzeria. I accompanied her to the halfway point of her journey before observing her from a distance. I suggested that she enter the residence, but she was reluctant and did not permit me to escort her to her home. I felt a sense of floating as I returned to my apartment. I was becoming increasingly distressed. I was perplexed by Fiona's refusal to assist me. I had assumed that women were expected to provide support for one another. She was uncooperative in helping me locate Henry's new address. I attempted to follow him from work, but he never went directly home, or I lost him in traffic before I met Rick twice a week, but after Henry left it became 3 or 4 times a week. I needed it, and with Henry gone, it was his fault I turned to Rick more often. However, in the last 2 weeks, Rick met me only once. He is under pressure from the school board's investigation into our affair and is trying not to. The union is attempting to prevent his dismissal, but the outlook is not favorable. We failed to consider the potential consequences. I was beginning to view the Hawaii trip as an excellent opportunity, but it ultimately proved to be a significant misstep. Financial constraints also played a role. Henry was only able to provide us with a limited budget, which meant that we had to eat at home every night and could only watch movies on premium channels. Given our financial constraints, we ordered an excessive number of movies, prompting Henry to threaten to terminate our cable subscription unless we reduced the quantity. He is exhibiting a wholly unreasonable behavior. Holly is currently residing with us, and at least she is deemed to take her out on occasion. However, I am unable to provide her with spending money, necessitating that Dean bear the financial responsibility each time. Dean is exerting considerable pressure. Holly is attempting to establish a relationship with Zex, which has caused her to become angry with me. This is due to Henry's ego being unable to accept the presence of a younger man who is capable of fulfilling my needs. Despite still loving him, I have made it clear that if he returns, he must be prepared to meet all of my needs or accept that I will seek to establish a relationship with someone else. This was not discussed on a bright Friday morning at 9:45, my telephone rang. It was likely that Becky had received the divorce papers at approximately that time. I did not respond to the call since I was at work, but I listened to the voicemail immediately. The situation had escalated. Henry, I have destroyed the papers. I will not sign them. We are not getting a divorce. You need to call me right now so that we can move on together. Becky's voice was aggressive and insistent. I was not surprised by her tone. In response, she maintained her position that I should accept her actions and that the responsibility for the failure of the relationship rested with me. I had not yet mentioned the private investigator report, but it might provide the necessary ammunition to end the relationship. The investigator had found evidence with relative ease in Hawaii, where they were less careful. Michelle and I had planned to go out that evening. I had only recently become acquainted with Joni, having met her a week ago. That evening, I was to meet Michelle's sister Lori and her husband Jeff while the children were to remain with friends. Despite my initial nervousness, I was optimistic about the evening ahead. When I collected Michelle from her home, she was dressed in a knee-length purple dress and heels. We proceeded to meet Jeff and Lori at the restaurant. We proceeded to make introductions. We then sat at a square table with Michelle on my right and Lori on my left. Lori inquired, "Michelle said you're getting a divorce, how's that going?" I replied, "My wife received the divorce papers today, but she intends to contest the decision. She cannot compel me to remain married, but she will attempt to do so." I attempted to maintain a calm and collected demeanor, but Lori persisted, "Yes, you have evidence of her infidelity. We can use this to our advantage. Her mother is also an unrepentant cheater, so she is unlikely to provide assistance. However, the group she volunteers with might eventually demonstrate concern. If I wait long enough, I can proceed without her signature." I explained my plan in detail, "And you expect Michelle to wait for this outcome?" Lori asked, her eyes narrowing. "I do not expect Michelle to take any action she does not want to take. If she decides not to wait, I will respect her choice. However, I am hopeful that she will do so." I stated, with sincerity, that I had not planned on worrying about the divorce, but that I was doing so to be with her. I added that I believe she is worth the wait. I then stated, with a sense of resolve, that I was processing Lori's words while Jeff grinned, seemingly impressed. "For now, I approve of you, but you'd better hold your own on the dance floor." Lori then stated, in a tone that lightened, that she was looking forward to it. I replied, experiencing a combination of relief and anticipation. The evening proceeded in an optimal manner. Michelle and I maintained close proximity throughout the majority of the event, with the exception of instances where we exchanged dance partners. Lori was distinguished by her taller, slimmer physique and straight blonde hair. In contrast, Michelle was more curvaceous and rounder in proportion. Despite these differences, they were unmistakably sisters. While dancing with Lori, she informed me that Michelle had informed her about my wife. I expressed my sincerest condolences and gratitude. It was challenging to maintain my self-esteem, but Michelle was a great source of support. I expressed my gratitude for her sympathy. She expressed a strong affinity for me and made it clear that I should not harm her. Lori's tone was serious, and I assured her that I would not do so. I also conveyed my own feelings of affection for Michelle. After returning to the apartment complex, Michelle had to collect her children. Lori and Jeff's children, Alexis and Marcus, were with a nanny. I kissed Michelle goodnight as she got into her car and walked back to my apartment. I had just settled into bed when there was a knock on the door. Upon seeing Michelle through the peephole, I opened it and she kissed me. She requested that I call her tomorrow. She then left, and I retired to my quarters to alleviate some of the mounting tension. I was unable to secure legal counsel, but the documentation indicated that Henry would bear the reasonable expenses, given that he was initiating the proceedings. I located a lawyer willing to assume the case, with the understanding that remuneration would be forthcoming at a later date. I was informed that the divorce proceedings would continue regardless of my signature on the requisite documents. The presiding judge would ultimately determine the terms. The terms were likely similar to Henry's proposal. Henry offered me the house until Holly finished her senior year and a year after, plus child support for 3 years. After that, the house would be sold or I could buy it. I was incredulous that this was occurring. I could not fathom why I had risked losing my marriage over something with no long-term consequence. The long-term impact on Henry. I attempted to arrange a meeting with Rick for next week, but he declined, stating that the relationship had lost its excitement since I had initiated divorce proceedings. Rick's attitude was uncooperative and disagreeable. Holly is experiencing a period of emotional distress. She is profoundly saddened by her father's absence and the dissolution of her marriage. Despite our close relationship, Holly and I were not as intimately connected as she now finds herself without Henry's presence in her life. There is a sense of disarray and confusion surrounding the divorce proceedings. It has been 2 weeks since I met with Lori, Michelle's sister, and there has been minimal progress in the legal separation. Becky remains reluctant to sign the divorce papers and is seeking alternative solutions. Despite the utilization of counseling, the process has proven to be an ineffective use of time. Michelle and I have been able to meet on a regular basis, often for brief periods after she has put Joni to bed. Thanks to Lori, we have been able to arrange a few dates each week. In return for our assistance, Lori has requested that we reciprocate the favor at some point in the future. On Saturday, Lori once again provided childcare services for Joni, allowing me to take Michelle out for wild dining and attending a concert in the downtown area. We overheard a scream from across the restaurant. Becky proceeded to shout, "Get your hands off my husband right now," before storming towards us with several of her embarrassed friends in tow. Becky then stated, "Yes, Becky, you caught me having dinner with my neighbor. Congratulations," in an attempt to maintain composure. Calm. "Oh, do not inform me that this is merely a single dinner. I am confident that you will engage in further activities at a later point in time. Observe her. She is likely divulging information about herself." Becky articulated her voice with a notable degree of animosity. Michelle, however, remained composed. "I hold the tenets of wedding vows in high regard, even if they are not my own. We have not yet engaged in any illicit activities, but I anticipate the opportunity to do so in the future. I am grateful for your assistance in this matter, Becky." She articulated her words in a composed and measured tone. The staff proceeded to escort Becky out, as she continued to shout, "Ed, stay away from him." I found myself pondering whether her companions remained with her. Michelle offered me reassurance, and so I was able to discern that this was indeed her wife. I expressed my sympathies and advised her that her actions were not worth the cost. The remainder of the evening unfolded with less drama. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, and the music was particularly affecting. Michelle spent a significant amount of time sitting on my lap, her scent exerting a powerful influence on me. On our way home, we held hands. At the apartment door, I made a decision. I turned to Michelle and said, "Michelle, honey, I need to tell you something." She looked into my eyes and clasped her hands behind my neck. "What is it?" she asked softly. I had not anticipated that this would be feasible, particularly in such a short time frame. "However, I am currently experiencing a profound romantic attachment to you. You are my primary focus at night and my initial thought in the morning. I am aware that we will encounter obstacles in the future, but I felt compelled to express my feelings." I verbalized my emotions and she reciprocated with a kiss. She then stated, "I love you too, Henry. You are a remarkable individual. It is difficult to comprehend the extent of our shared experiences. We have a considerable number of challenges to overcome, yet we are determined to persevere and remain together. Had circumstances been different, we would undoubtedly be in each other's beds by now. However, we recognize that there will be a time when we will be able to fully embrace our relationship." We embraced and kissed each other on her doorstep, aware that we could not enter without succumbing to temptation. The last kiss was followed by our separation. This morning, my lawyer informed me that Henry has intensified the situation. His lawyer sent over photographs of Rick and me in Hawaii, taken by a detective that Henry had hired. While these photographs cannot be used in the divorce proceedings, they could still significantly complicate my life. They might make it challenging for me to secure employment if the divorce is finalized. If the divorce proceedings proceed as anticipated, securing employment will be a necessity. The decision to confront Henry and Michelle at the restaurant was an error in judgment. I had underestimated Henry's willingness to risk losing me and had assumed he would agree to share custody of Rick. However, I had not anticipated that the marriage would end in this manner. Over a month has elapsed since the trip, and the situation continues to deteriorate. Dean terminated the relationship with Holly today following their date. She held a strong affection for him and anticipated a future of matrimony. Upon his departure, she became visibly distraught, retreating to her room. I provided solace for approximately 15 minutes until she regained composure. Dean terminated the relationship with both my mother and Holly. Holly wept profusely, her face buried in her hands. What transpired? I inquired about the situation with great distress. He demanded sexual intercourse, but I repeatedly declined. He asserted that I should be more forthcoming in light of my mother's conduct. When I relayed your advice regarding the changing needs of women in relationships, he inquired about my expectations if we were to marry. When I remained silent, he terminated our engagement. She informed me that I was going to cheat on him, her voice trembling with emotion. It became evident that the news of my affair had likely spread from Rick's public school disciplinary hearing. I had underestimated the consequences, assuming that Henry would remain silent to avoid embarrassment. My mother had advised me, saying, "Dad." Eventually, she accepted her affair with Uncle Leo to avoid a public scandal. I had assumed that Henry would react similarly, however, I now recognize the necessity of persuading him to return. Rick is no longer a factor, and I am willing to guarantee that I will never see him again. Once Henry is at ease, I will endeavor to convince him that I am only interested in him on a single occasion. Following this, I will seek to identify a suitable replacement in a discreet manner. I will attempt to follow him home from work once more. I spoke with Denise Duncan today, and Becky still refuses to sign the divorce papers, insisting on another chance to talk and work things out. Denise advised that I meet her face-to-face to convince her that I will not tolerate her behavior, otherwise, this could drag on for months. I had been preoccupied with other matters, despite the 5-week interval since my encounter with Michelle. That evening, I experienced a profound romantic attachment to her. I was finally meeting Michelle's daughter, Joni. Michelle had assured me that the meeting would not be decisive, yet I was acutely aware of the significance of Joni's approval. We commenced with a visit to Chuck E. Cheese. I operated the vehicle while Michelle held my hand, and Joni smiled in the rear seating area of the restaurant. Joni then proceeded to pull me into the play area, and I was ultimately defeated in a game of tag. We then proceeded to engage in a discussion during one of the games, during which Joni was approximately 8 years of age. I was astonished at the strength of the girl, who was already quite advanced for her age. I asked her, catching my breath, if she would like me to be her new dad. She looked at me with big brown eyes and said, "Will you be my new dad?" I knelt down and took her small hands in mine. "I'd like to be your new dad if you don't mind," I said, "but you don't have to decide now. I think I'd like you to be my new dad." She replied, her smile broadening. "My friends' dads don't play with them like you do," she said. "And Mom says you make her happy." She replied with a smile that indicated a high level of satisfaction. I felt tears welling up and asked for a hug. Michelle watched us closely as we returned to the table. Joni was Michelle's miniature version, just as Holly was Becky's. The rest of the evening was wonderful. We played games, earned tickets, and Joni received a fancy Barbie doll. She then went for ice cream and returned to the apartment. Joni was tired, so we put her to bed. I read her a story, and Michelle and I sat on the couch. She inquired as to whether I was prepared to become a father to a young girl once more at my age. I had initially harbored reservations, but now that I had met her, I was unable to imagine a different outcome. I responded with sincerity, expressing that I would be delighted to have a child with her. She then asked if I would consider having a child with one of our own. Joan's father would be a dream come true. I stated this with great emotion, and she replied with a broad smile, indicating her eagerness for the divorce to conclude. We engaged in sexual intercourse, and I subsequently disabled my mobile phone. Later, I received a call and voicemail from Denise Henry, who is Becky's legal counsel. She informed me that she had decided to sign the necessary documents and would be visiting my office the following week. I was not required to be present, but I would notify her when everything was ready. This was the message I received from Denise. Her tone was businesslike, yet there was a hint of relief in her voice. I sensed a weight lift off my shoulders as I looked at Michelle, realizing that our future was finally within reach. That night, I slept very well. My marriage was finally ending. That morning, I was ready to fight to the end, but seeing Holly crying over Dean, I realized the pain this was causing her. I decided to sign the papers to avoid ruining my daughter's life. I was 41 years old. A year has elapsed since the aforementioned event. I coped with this decision by engaging in excessive alcohol consumption and promiscuous sexual behavior. I awoke in a stranger's apartment, sent Holly to her friend Leslie's residence, got dressed in a quiet manner, and left my vehicle, which was still parked outside the club. I called a taxi, went home, took a shower, and was overcome with a desire to go to bed. I spent the entire weekend with Michelle and Joni. We went to the zoo on Saturday and had dinner at Laurie and Jeff's residence on Sunday. I spent the majority of the day in the company of Alexis and Marcus, as they had been raised together. Jeff, who was a genial individual and possessed expertise in the use of grills, was approximately 180 centimeters in height and exhibited a commendable level of physical fitness. He had participated in baseball at the collegiate level and had recently reached the age of 40, while Laurie was 38. While the sisters engaged in social interaction and observed the children, I devoted my attention to the grill, seeking to become better acquainted with Jeff. He and Laurie had been married for 15 years and he expressed a profound and enduring love for her. She continues to serve as the source of my daily motivation. And do what I have to do. I want her to be proud of me and happy that she married me. Jeff said, his voice filled with determination. I'm sure you're doing everything right. She has that confidence from knowing she achieved her goal. I responded, hoping to reassure him. I've known Michelle for a long time. She's crazy about you, Henry. You got a good woman. She was completely devoted to Jay, and that's why what he did hurt her so much. Jeff continued, his tone earnest. Oh no. I am confident that Michelle would never even consider such an action. I expressed my conviction with a sense of assurance. I appreciate your perspective, Jeff. I do not believe that Michelle would take such a step. I am fully committed to her, and I am optimistic about the future. I am pleased with the progress in both aspects of my life. Hopefully, I will be able to obtain Becky's signature on the necessary documents within the next few days. After the 90-day waiting period, I intend to proceed with the wedding. The waiting period of 1 day allowed me the opportunity to bring Michelle to the altar, which I plan to do as soon as possible. My thoughts were in a state of confusion. I believe it is Wednesday, but I have lost track of time. Since last Friday, when I decided to sign the divorce papers, I have been consuming alcohol and engaging in sexual intercourse with different men on a nightly basis. Fortunately, the last few partners were more satisfactory than the first, and I attempted to alleviate my distress, but today, if it is indeed Wednesday, I am compelled to sign the documents. I am uncertain as to how I will cope without Henry. I hold him in high regard, but I required something more. I never harbored feelings for Rick. I was supposed to spend my life with Henry, growing old together and raising our grandchildren. I also planned to travel the globe. Now, I am faced with loneliness and regret for my foolish actions. It would be unbearable for Henry to end up with that beautiful brunette I observed him with at the restaurant. She was remarkably attractive and considerably younger than me. I could not bear the pain of losing Henry to someone like her. I proceeded to my lawyer's office, where we visited Henry's lawyer. I had hoped Henry would be present, but he was not. It was painful to see that he had signed the papers several weeks ago. He was unable to. I was prepared to wait for an opportunity to make amends, and I would not have held him responsible for his actions. Perhaps at some point in the future, I would be able to express my regret in person. For the time being, I instructed my lawyer to review and confirm the documents before I signed them. I ate dinner alone that evening, as Holly was spending more time away, likely distancing herself from me. I then returned to the club, where I found a table with 3 young men and informed them that I was offering a one-time in a singularly advantageous situation. We departed the bar with haste, leaving behind the remaining patrons. I was entirely sober, and this was my retribution for my actions following the signing and filing of the documents. The waiting period of 30 days has already elapsed. My affection for Michelle and Joni continues to intensify. Joni now refers to me as Daddy, a term that evokes a profound sense of warmth. Laurie and Michelle have already commenced preparations for the wedding, with an emphasis on floral arrangements and a memorable reception. I proposed the day after Becky signed the relevant documents, driven by an eagerness to formalize our union. The most challenging aspect for me to accept was Michelle's engagement, given the circumstances surrounding Becky's actions. While I could comprehend Becky's motivations, I struggled to reconcile her actions with the apparent happiness of those involved. Holly, in particular, seemed to experience a sense of joy in my humiliation. She viewed her mother's actions as an inevitable rite of passage, positioning herself as a victim of Becky's self-destructive tendencies. From a central perspective, however, both her joy and disdain for my feelings caused significant distress and ultimately led to our estrangement. What initially attracted me to Michelle was the opportunity to provide a more optimal upbringing for Joni when Holly was still young. I invested a considerable amount of time in my professional endeavors, leaving the majority of her upbringing to Becky. Holly and I engaged in activities together, such as soccer and volleyball, but those were not conducive to imparting guidance on the nuances of marriage and relationships. I concentrated on instilling fortitude and resilience, whereas Becky emphasized other values that ultimately proved counterproductive. I found myself questioning whether any of these issues could be rectified in the near future. The dissolution of my marriage has been a significant source of distress. I have been counting down the days on my calendar without Henry, and I feel as though I have lost my purpose in life. My daughter, Holly, who is now 18, spends the majority of her time away from home and no longer requires my care. Just a few months ago, I was in a situation where I had a supportive husband, a wonderful daughter, and a romantic partner. However, my actions led to the breakdown of this arrangement. I am uncertain about how I will cope once the divorce is final. The fact that Henry and I were legally married provided me with a sense of hope. I have not spoken to Henry since the day I flew to Hawaii, except for my outburst at the restaurant. I have not been informed of his activities. I am uncertain as to whether he is still involved with the attractive brunette from the restaurant. Is their relationship genuine, or is he merely using her to distract himself from my presence? I am concerned about his professional prospects. I hope that my actions have not negatively impacted his career trajectory. Everything was supposed to proceed according to plan. I had assumed that Henry was unaware of my feelings and that Holly was supportive of me. However, I realize now that I was naive to discuss my situation openly. I find myself sometimes drinking a glass of wine, placing it on my nightstand. I have not yet found a romantic interest for the evening, but I never return home alone. When I am socializing, it sometimes provides me with strength, but it is really just a desperate attempt to temporarily escape from my grief and feelings. The divorce would be finalized in a few days, and my wedding to Michelle was in 3 weeks, which gave me time to obtain the final decree and a marriage license. This morning, Michelle and Laurie went shopping with the children while I cleaned my apartment. Michelle's lease expired last month, and she switched to a month-to-month agreement, although I still had a few months remaining. We purchased a house in the nearby area to maintain Johnny's enrollment in the same school district, which was one of the best decisions we could have made. In the state, we would conclude the apartment lease the following week. Despite the fact that Michelle and I had been residing together, she was insistent that we should wait until marriage to take up residence together officially. Consequently, we maintained our separate apartments. Financial considerations were not a barrier to this arrangement, and I was amenable to it. I received a message indicating that they were returning and requesting that I ensure I was home. This struck me as somewhat peculiar, but I confirmed and looked forward to their return. I received a reply with a smiley face. Michelle had her own key, and I usually left the door unlocked when waiting for her. When she knocked, I was taken aback, wondering if she was playing a game. I believed I had opened the door and was astonished to see my daughter. "Hello, Daddy," Holly said quietly. I gazed at my daughter in silence until she shifted uncomfortably. "Can I come in, Dad?" she inquired, her voice trembling. I shook off the shock and invited her in. She proceeded into the living room, and I closed the door behind her. Holly was holding back tears as she stood in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" I inquired. I made it clear I didn't want to hear from you after what you said, I replied, attempting to maintain composure. I made a mistake, Dad. I need to talk to you if you don't want to see me after I will not trouble you further. Please. She pleaded, her eyes welling up with tears. Okay, Holly, but how did you learn of my residence? I inquired, perplexed. Your girlfriend Michelle revealed it, she replied. How did that occur? I asked, still taken aback. She called me, introduced herself, and informed me that you were getting married and that we needed to speak, she explained. Is it true? I asked, hoping she would not be angry with her. I hope you are not upset with her, she said. I am Holly, she said, her voice a blend of hope and fear. She was not the aloof child I had last spoken with. Please, have a seat and make yourself comfortable, I said, offering her a drink. I consumed a beverage prepared with ice and I inquired as to whether there was anything further she wished to convey. I then proceeded to settle into my chair. Dad, I am profoundly remorseful for the series of unfortunate events that transpired and for the statements I made, particularly the last one. I recognize that your actions were unjustified and that my actions were selfish, causing you pain. Holly began to speak, her voice imbued with a profound sense of regret. Mr. Harrington was subsequently dismissed from his position, and the reason soon became apparent to the entire student body. My mother was unable to provide the financial assistance he had been providing, and he began to exert pressure on me for it. I was acutely aware of my role as a parent and knew I needed to speak with Dean's parents. I had a close relationship with them prior to Holly and Dean's relationship, and I was uncertain as to their reaction. I inquired further, indicating that I needed to know more. She regarded me with the same sweet gaze I had become accustomed to seeing. No, Daddy, she replied softly, her tone conveying a sense of relief. I then asked about other developments. Dean had asked whether my defending my mother meant that I would cheat on him when we were older. I was unsure how to respond, so She assumed I would and left me. She explained that her eyes filled with tears. Would you? She asked gently. No, she replied firmly. She then called me Dad again. I thought about that day a lot, even then. I might have said it depended on the situation, but now I can say for sure that the answer is no. I inquired further, feeling a sense of relief. Yes, Daddy. I spend a considerable amount of time with Leslie's parents. I have lost a number of friends, but they have remained close. I was informed by my mother that a woman is expected to take care of her family throughout her life and is therefore not entitled to pursue her own interests. They expressed their opinion that she behaved in an unacceptable manner. Holly, the wife and mother, stated in a gentle tone, "You will not encounter any objections from me." I replied with a sense of relief and understanding, noting a growing understanding between us. They discussed wedding vows and promises when Leslie was young. Mr. P fell seriously ill and informed Mrs. P that he understood if she was compelled to seek an alternative partner because he was unable to remain faithful to her. This decision provoked a strong emotional reaction from her, who asserted that the vows they had exchanged were meant to be a commitment to remain faithful to each other through both good and bad times. She had not considered that he might seek an alternative partner. They were unequivocal in their stance that her mother's actions were driven by self-interest. Holly, in a voice laden with realization, stated, "You know, Holly. In the past, I possessed a higher sex drive than your mother. However, I did not insist on it. We engaged in sexual intercourse only when she was ready. According to your mother's logic, I could have found another woman whenever I desired. Do you believe she would have been amenable to that arrangement?" I inquired, attempting to elucidate my perspective. "It is highly unlikely that she would have remained with you." I did not anticipate that outcome. Holly responded, her eyes widening with understanding. "Daddy, I'm so sorry. I believed Mom without thinking. I got caught up in her excitement and our secret. I was wrong," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. I handed her a napkin and hugged her tightly. "I forgive you, baby. I needed you to understand. It is crucial for you to comprehend the moral impropriety of your actions. Attempting to convey this to you would only result in your opposition to me. You are obliged to discern the distinction between right and wrong. I am gratified that you have finally grasped this concept. Does this signify your intention to resume our relationship, Holly? Holly then informed her father that a wedding was imminent and that she required his assistance. She proceeded to convey her anticipation for the event, expressing her belief that her mother's friend, Leslie, would also be in attendance. Holly's enthusiasm was palpable. She appeared to be brimming with excitement, and her father sensed that she had something on her mind. He sought to engage her in conversation, inquiring about her thoughts. I inquired further, detecting her reluctance. It's challenging, Dad. I don't want to be selfish, but I'm uncertain. Please, Holly, just be open with me. We can resolve this together. I encouraged her, suggesting that she consider living with me and Michelle. She asked, her voice low and anxious, "Can I live with you and Michelle, Dad?" Initially, I assumed the issue was financial, but I provided Becky with sufficient funds for groceries, given the financial implications of the divorce. Following the dissolution of the marriage, my wife will be required to pay higher alimony and child support. However, this is not the primary concern. Holly appeared to be experiencing a sense of distress, as if she was contemplating a potential separation from her mother. Holly, could you please elaborate on why you would choose to leave your mother and live with me, Dad? She's not herself. She always seems to be intoxicated. On occasion, she fails to return home until the following morning. When she does return, it is often after midnight, and she is accompanied by a male acquaintance who subsequently departs. Malone is responsible for transporting her to retrieve her vehicle. Holly's voice was filled with concern. Does she engage in sexual intercourse with these men? The house. I was prompted to investigate due to my protective instincts. My anger was not directed at Becky, but at the potential danger Holly might face. Despite my anger towards Becky, I would not want any harm to come to her. I am unsure if she is present when I am not around, but it is possible that she is. Holly, Leslie's daughter, voiced her concerns in a subdued and anxious tone. I informed her that she could stay with us, but that we needed to discuss the matter with her mother. I sent Michelle a text message requesting her immediate presence. Holly and I were seated on the sofa when Michelle arrived, and Holly rested her head on my shoulder. This indicated that the wedding was still on, and that Holly was, "I am not angry at you for inviting Holly. It is evident that you cannot easily dismiss me." Michelle attempted to inject humor into the situation, but her tone was serious. She sat on the other side of Holly, and Joni climbed onto my lap. "Honey, we have a problem," I said, my tone serious. I proceeded to explain Holly's situation with Becky, who had clearly entered a self-destructive phase. Michelle was fully supportive, urging me to take whatever action I deemed necessary. She suggested that I accompany her, but I felt it was preferable for me to go alone and leave Holly in her care. I drove to my former residence for the first time since that day. The yard was in a state of neglect, but otherwise appeared to be in good condition. The house appeared to be somewhat neglected, though it was otherwise in a satisfactory condition. Becky's vehicle was present in the driveway, and there were no other cars in the vicinity. This seemed to be a promising indication. I proceeded to ring the bell, and the interior of the house appeared to be unchanged, yet there was no sign of Becky. She seemed to be in a state of dishevelment, had lost weight, and was clad in an old robe. "Henry, I beseech you, you have returned. I implore you to share with me your experiences. You're taking me back." "I'll do anything," Becky pleaded, her voice desperate. "No, Becky. I want to help you," Holly told me. She proceeded to relay the situation to me, emphasizing that she could not continue living in the same way. I said, attempting to remain calm. She stared at me, attempting to process my words, and then abruptly changed the subject. "Have you forgiven Holly? And what about me? Where is my forgiveness?" she demanded, her eyes wild. "I forgive you, Becky," I said softly. "Then why don't you want to take me back? I love you, Henry. I need you. Please, Henry," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Becky," I said, raising my voice to get her attention. I hated yelling, but I needed her to. "Becky, please calm down. I am here to help you," I said, my voice firm but gentle. I accompanied Becky to the emergency room, where her blood alcohol level was exceedingly high. A psychiatrist had her hospitalized for 72 hours, citing her as a danger to herself. During her time in the hospital, Michelle and I conducted research on rehabilitation centers and selected one treatment option. The decision to seek treatment was entirely voluntary, and we were optimistic that we could persuade her to agree to go. That was 7 years ago. As I prepared to walk my daughter Holly down the aisle, I reflected on those events. It was a challenging journey, but we were ultimately successful. My wife Michelle and I are still happily married, and our son Johnny, who is now 15, looks up to her and his late sister with admiration. Maid of honor Amelia, age 5, adores Johnny and will soon commence her studies. Tamara, age 3, is brimming with energy and exhibits a restless demeanor at night. I carry her to a crib. Michelle, who is 8 months pregnant, continues to radiate beauty. It is a girl, and we are still deliberating on a name. However, Aunt Laurie might be a potential inspiration for her namesake. At times, I find myself nostalgic for the Becky I married and the plans we had made. I had assumed that we would have been married for 50 years, watching our children grow, but circumstances did not unfold in that way. We are now on friendly terms and spend time with Becky and her husband, Martin, on a regular basis. This is not what I had anticipated, but it is a fulfilling way to live.